How many gameplay hours do you have in Breath of the Wild? For me at least, it's definitely up there. I can't help but notice that whenever I sit down to play the game, I blink, and it's already been 4 hours. Why does that happen? Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games of all time, and it seems this isn't exactly a controversial opinion. The game was critically acclaimed by reviewers on release, and has sold almost 30 million units worldwide. With the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, having just come out, it seems this modern Zelda formula Nintendo conjured has universal appeal. How? Just what crazy magic did the wizards at Nintendo pull to make a game that everyone seems to love? This game that pulls you in deep enough to break loose your connection with the outside world. Let's break down the game design of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Generally speaking, the different types of players can be nailed down to a simple spectrum, which combine to form 4 quadrants. On the horizontal axis, we have players and NPCs to the left, and world to the right. On the vertical axis, we have acting on the top, and interacting on the bottom. These traits are what defines the player archetypes, and don't worry, it'll make more sense after I explain them. There's a great mnemonic device to remember them by. Clubs, diamonds, hearts, and spades. The 4 playing card suits. First, the killers. They're the clubs, because they like to beat things up. The Zelda series has no shortage of combat during gameplay, and Breath of the Wild is no exception. The game introduced weapon durability, mandating the player constantly acquires new equipment. Additionally, the game has a sophisticated physics engine and, quote, chemistry engine, which further encourages creativity in combat. The developers elaborate on these systems during GDC 2017, and shared that they were implemented to create, quote, multiplicative gameplay. This term describes intricately interconnected game mechanics that frequently interact with one another in diverse ways, creating a breadth of dynamics. I explain what mechanics and dynamics are in my previous video. God, that was a terrible joke. Alright, next we have the Achievers. They're the diamonds, because they're out to collect loot. But the Achievers as a category is broader than that. Speedrunners and achievement grinders fall under this category too. Achievers may grind for loot, yes, but the motive is what distinguishes them. They do it for status. This isn't necessarily status in front of others. It still counts if the motive is entirely intrinsic, with no intent to share. Breath of the Wild has 120 shrines, 900 Korok seed puzzles, God knows how many side quests. The list is extremely long. All of that is also entirely optional for beating the game. For speedrunners, this game was practically designed for discovering cool tech and heading straight to the boss. The game even taunts the player a little about that, almost like a challenge.
I believe it would be quite reckless for you to head directly to the castle at this point.
The hearts are the socializers, those that enjoy interacting with the living in the game world. Though Breath of the Wild is a single-player game, NPCs, when written believably, still elicit the feeling of a social interaction with other players. Breath of the Wild has a bit more than 400 NPCs around its world, with 76 side quests that the players can complete. There's no shortage of characters to interact with and cultures to experience in Breath of the Wild's Hyrule. Finally, the explorers, the spades that dig around the world and discover. Zelda games typically take place in Hyrule, as does Breath of the Wild. However, its iteration of Hyrule is gigantic, one of the biggest game maps of all time, with no shortage of different biomes and structures to discover. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you certainly know that this game has the explorers covered. And those are the 4 player typologies. The chart's creator, Richard Bartle, later expanded on this model, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll use this simplified version. Also, Note that you are never locked into one place during gameplay. You'll rarely ever stay in one spot throughout a playthrough of a game. So, now that we understand player typologies, we can begin explaining why everyone so easily loses track of time playing this game. Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Robert Csikszentmihalyi introduced the concept of the flow state in the 1970s. His description of the flow state was the state of full concentration and complete engagement in a task or activity. It's more commonly dubbed being in the zone, which you are likely to have experienced before. Csikszentmihalyi placed it on a graph he created to show the psychological outcomes of challenge level versus skill level when performing a task. While these categories should be pretty self-explanatory, there are only two relevant ones for now, so we'll dive into them in more detail. These two are the state of arousal and the state of flow. Okay, hold on. By arousal, it means the state of psychological arousal, like piqued interest. Know what you might have been thinking? Don't make me take out the club. The flow state has pretty clear symptoms. Primarily the dimming of environmental awareness and the loss of ego. A state of such high concentration that one's conscience loses track of things like social identity, bodily needs, irrelevant environmental factors, etc. Most importantly, the flow state makes one lose track of time. To enter the flow state, there are 4 conditions. The task must provide an indication of progress of some sort. This tells the subject that they are advancing, which is necessary to allow them to determine their next moves. The task must provide instant feedback. This allows a subject to adjust their behavior to match the challenge. The task must have a sense of purpose. The subject must feel as if overcoming the challenge is meaningful. And finally, a balance between perceived challenge and perceived skill must be struck. Note the use of perceived, as all that matters here is what the subject thinks, not necessarily what is actually happening. This is relevant in many other aspects of game design. Let's adapt these criteria to specifically target our application. The game must immediately communicate to the player the challenge ahead that needs to be overcome, a purpose in completing the challenge, the consequences of their actions, and the game must strike a balance between challenge and skill. Okay, so now that we've got a clear checklist, let's apply it to Breath of the Wild. We'll start simple to wrap our heads around what we're looking for. Early in the game, we encounter a tree with 2 apples on a branch. They sparkle, and the player naturally assumes apples will be useful on their journey, especially if they see the baked apple that implies the game as a cooking system on the floor ahead. So, here's the challenge. Obtain the apples. The purpose? Have more apples in your inventory. Secretly, this challenge is an early test from the developers of the player's understanding of the climbing mechanics they've just learned. The player can't reach the apples from the ground. They've also just learned how to climb, and they may think, if I climb this tree, then I can take it, and they would be right. The game has clearly communicated that the player's action, climbing, has directly led to their success. They've overcome the game's challenge, and their reward is healing items to help them on their journey. This is a simple moment, but it's checked all the boxes and made the player feel like they've just achieved something.
And if I can climb this, and then I can take the apples. Ah, look at that!
It may seem insignificant, but I highly doubt you ever noticed as a player how intentional the apple placement on those trees were. Players hate feeling like the game is holding their hands. In this example, the game designer's hands are invisible. As a developer, you want to design like this. Now that we know what we're looking for, let's find a more involved example from further into a player's first playthrough. After obtaining a bow, they might stumble into this skeleton head cave with enemies inside it. If they wish to explore the cave, the challenge becomes defeating the enemies with the purpose of exploring the cave. There are many valid approaches, but the developers designed it so the player would discover this environmental method as an introduction to the game's chemistry engine. The player can clearly see that there are explosives inside this cave, and hanging through one of the eyes is a flame suspended by rope. They may think, I wonder if shooting the suspended flame will ignite the explosives, and attempt to fire an arrow at the cage. If they succeed, they are rewarded with the flame dropping, triggering a large explosion with many visible health bars dropping to nothing, showing them that their creativity eliminated many enemies with a single arrow.
Maybe it's not. Maybe you need like a penetrating arrow.
Wait,
Okay.
Yes! No! Yes!
This is why you played Breath of the Wild so much. The puzzle designs clearly pose a challenge to you, invisibly nudge you in the right direction, and fairly reward your successes. Breath of the Wild asks a player to do whatever they want, and then pulls them in by presenting a carefully balanced challenge that meets their skill level. This doesn't happen infrequently throughout the game either. The developers were careful to ensure both short and long challenges of this nature existed all throughout Hyrule. The 900 Korok challenges are very quick. The Shrine challenges are generally a bit longer, and the Divine Beasts are much longer, to name some prominent examples. Some of you may be thinking, but that's not what I did in my playthrough. And you'd be right to say that. All those aforementioned challenges are optional. The developers made sure their challenge balance met the players regardless of where they lie on the typology. Breath of the Wild encourages such freedom that everyone's playthrough can be radically different. So now, we'll cover how challenges were designed to work for the 4-player typologies. For the sake of brevity, we're only going to cover some examples for the 4 types quickly. Let's say you're a killer. How do you become a better killer? More health and better weapons, right? Well, you get better weapons by battling stronger enemies. Want a higher maximum health? The Divine Beasts give you those, and there are plenty of Test of Strength shrines for you to try for even more hearts. For socializers, over 400 NPCs to speak to, side quests to undertake, regions to protect by conquering their divine beasts, etc. Achievers, check out this cool new tech I discovered. I bet I can beat that time if I try again. No way I'm making it up to that divine beast on my own? Watch me. Explorers have a massive map with navigational challenges all throughout. Link's climbing and gliding abilities turn every wall into a ladder and every cliff into a ramp, provided Link has enough stamina to keep going. Am I going to be able to clear this gap? How do I get across this river? I wonder how I can get up there. And that doesn't even touch on the environmental challenges, utilizing the game's aforementioned chemistry engine. Now, realistically, there's no objective way to prove that Breath of the Wild achieves a challenge skill balance like the criteria stated, as it's the result of a development team's hard thinking and quality assurance testing. However, Breath of the Wild had a lot of those two things, and the game wouldn't have resonated so strongly if the developers hadn't managed to strike this balance so well. Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games of all time, so I can personally vouch for how balanced my playthroughs were. So, for you game designers in the audience, next time you resume your Tears of the Kingdom playthrough, revisit Breath of the Wild or even play it for the first time, try take a step back and think about how the designers put forward challenges that entice you, engage you, teach you, test you, and ultimately, reward you. Thanks so much for watching this video, guys, and for the incredible reception of the previous video. It really means a lot. If you want to see more of this kind of content, please subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, then likes always appreciated. Music's in the description, and goodbye.